And welcome to a probably snake oil laden edition of Ben's Junk. Say it ain't so, Benny. Anyway, a few months ago now, V Westlife put out a very good video on a device called the Telesound. Now, that item had been on my wanna-do list for quite some time, but I could never get my hands on one at a decent price, especially for something that I was probably only ever going to use once. But anyway, the Telesound was this device from 1980, and it was effectively a precursor to a soundbar, like you'd hook up to a TV today. But of course, this being 1980, broadcast TV was, as far as I know, all still in mono. Maybe there was some experimental stuff somewhere, but for all intents and purposes, still mono. But what you had was this, bar with two speakers built in, and you just run sound out of the TV through the headphone jack, or maybe an output, or maybe just hooking a couple of alligator clips to the speaker, and it would kind of create this pseudo stereo thing for you. Well, today's item, the Rhoades Teledapter from 1981 or 82, does the same thing, but there are no speakers built in. You have to supply your own amplifier and speakers, basically your own stereo system. So anyway, this might be old news to some of you, but just bear with me. But I'm going to discuss the concept of mono reprocessed for stereo here, and it might take me 3 or 4 minutes. But anyway, if you're not familiar, and I am dumbing this down quite a bit, bear in mind, starting in the late 50s, early 60s, record companies were, stereo records and tapes were becoming a thing. And record companies were taking existing mono recordings and just kind of fidgeting with them, fussing with them a bit to make them seem stereo and plop them on a stereo record or tape or whatever. And of course, mono audio, one channel of audio, stereo, 2 channels. And most gear, like with a stereo cartridge on a turntable, the needle, it just takes whatever. If you feed something that's truly in mono to it, it's just going to make a duplicate of it. And so you'll have a perfect duplicate, one in each channel of whatever mono stuff. And say you're listening with headphones, it's all going to seem absolutely perfectly dead center to you. Well, in this case, what the labels were doing was fussing around with the sound. So it would be just barely, I guess, legally speaking, I use the term incredibly loosely, there is no legal, but just barely true stereo. And so, 2 channel. And there were a few ways of doing this, but the most common way was, I'm not going to get technical here, but if you were wearing headphones, whatever would be the center from your perspective, dual mono, is actually drooping off a little to one side or the other. And then the more open channel would have more noise coming through it, more hiss, more just stuff coming through it. So if you listened through speakers, it would kind of give off the illusion of some actual stereo panning going on. Now, there were some much more extreme ways to do this, but that was the common one. And that more common one is exactly what seems to be going on with this. I have done a dry run with this, and yeah, it's kind of like listening to a 60s mono reprocessed for stereo sort of thing. So anyway, let's dig in here. Let's see what we got. Well, let's just start with the main unit. Might as well. Now, I don't know if the guts of this were held down with some sort of adhesive at some point, but things are a bit loose in there at this point. And I should note that the whole thing is held together with rivets instead of screws, which I really don't like. But yeah, I haven't been able to examine the guts of this thing, unfortunately. But anyway, if we go to the back here, there isn't much to it. We've got a volume knob here, output level, as they call it. And I found you have to keep it cranked all the way up. The levels that this thing puts out are just not very good. Now, these two screws here seem to be holding something to the back panel. They don't have any bearing on the level or what kind of stereo effect you get, at least not that I've noticed. Otherwise, we got 4 jacks here, 2 input ones, and the manual tells you if it's a TV or a VCR which one you should use. But I've experimented with both and let them sit for a good while each, and it doesn't really matter. One gives you a little more low end, one gives you a little more high end in the sound. That seems to be the only real difference. And yeah, the thing doesn't get hot. Nothing's happened, no distortion. So I'm not really sure what the logic was in the manual. Maybe somebody in the audience knows. But anyway, jacks 3 and 4 here are a normal stereo output to run to presumably your stereo, or maybe a phono preamp or something, or a headphone adapter, something like that, some sort of amplifier. Anyway, this was new old stock when I got it, but as I've said a few times now, I have dinked around with this, so unfortunately things aren't pretty in the bag anymore. But let's just dig through the contents here. So I'll just put the loose parts back in the box so they don't run away on me. But anyway, we've got a pair, or a set rather, of normal old stereo audio phono cables. And of course it's black on this one instead of white for the left channel, but yeah, means the same thing. Otherwise, we've got an adapter cable, phono on one end, and 3.5 millimeter or 1/8 inch on the other, mono. And if you want to go phono on both ends, they did give you a little adapter here. Or if you're a real nutcase, you can, they gave you a couple of alligator clips there. So you could hack off the end of this, strip down the wire a bit, separate the 2 internal wires and hook them to alligator clips and actually hook them to the speaker of your TV. I don't know how good an idea that is. I'm not going to try that one. There's certainly no point to it for me for a one-off. But yeah, that's it. That's everything in the box. So otherwise, the only thing left to do is do that demo thing. Okay, before we get started here, I just want to give a brief lay of the land. And our movie today is Teenagers from Outer Space. And yes, it is very much in the running for an Archiveland public domain theater live stream at some point. But anyway, we are, in the name of keeping things at least somewhat period appropriate here, we're using VHS for our video and audio source. But we're running just mono single channel audio out of the VHS deck to the input of the Teledapter, and then stereo out to my field recorder, just kind of hanging out in the back of the shot there. And ultimately a direct feed from the field recorder will come to the camcorder, and I will also record a copy of it simultaneously to the SD card that's in the field recorder, because the preamp sucks on this camcorder and I'd rather just splice in a better sounding copy of the audio. But otherwise, yeah, I'll do some A/B tests so you can hear just the plain old mono soundtrack for the movie versus our mock stereo. So let me take one more cut here. I will swap out my microphone for a feed from the field recorder. I'll reposition the camera and we'll do our proper demo.
From where have you learned such things?
I have read. I have read from this book. I discovered it and kept it hidden. Somehow it survived the flames of the Annihilators when our people were turned into mechanized slaves.
That book has indeed made you forget many things. We are the supreme race. We have the supreme weapons. Keep him under guard, Thor. I will study the reactions of the young Gargan.
Captain! Captain, something has gone wrong. Look here.
What? What has happened?
I do not know. It suddenly fell limp, and now does not move.
Assemble the TRSs, hook in the gas grading instruments. Be quick! How did he get free?
He escaped from Saul. I could have stopped him.
Derek is to be brought back alive. He is the son of our leader.
Derek?
I reported his actions and was connected with the leader himself. He told me this. He said Derek does not know.
As the son of our leader, the High Court will pardon him.
He will be pardoned.
At the rate the Gargon is expected to grow, what will prevent it from tearing loose the leg bands and escaping from the cave?
We shall be back before that happens, unless it should receive food in excess of the atmospheric elements. We will leave nothing else for it to consume.
Imagine. Thousands of beasts like that. Millions of times enlarged.
He has already threatened our lives.
If that becomes the case, he must be destroyed. And any beings with whom he might communicate, they must be destroyed. Your orders are complete.
I shall send my best man.
Well, there you have it. Genuine mono reprocessed for stereo, with the regular mono cut in at times just for contrast. Yeah, real exciting stuff, isn't it? But one of those little quirky things that managed to find its way into television for a little while. Anyway, that is going to be it for this installment of Ben's Junk. I'll talk to you again soon. Since these things are so cheap and plentiful online, I can't resist. Now, this may or may not work. I've got the smallest bit I've got, 1/16 in here, and that's just about the right size for the rivets in the side of this. But this drill has seen better days, and the battery is not all that great anymore. The charger's kind of messed up. It actually melted one of my batteries at one point. So yeah, the only other power drill I own is an impact driver, and unfortunately that's the only fully properly working one I've got right now, and I think that would be a little bit overkill for this, but yeah, if I want another bad enough, the cheapest price on Fleabay as of my making this for one of these is $8. New old stock ones start at 15. So yeah, if I could just get the two off, I would just love to take a look under the hood. But it may or may not happen. Of course, getting a rivet out when you've only got access to one side could be interesting. But anyway, let me take my mic off for this just so I don't get tangled. Okay, hopefully that's enough for me to at least peel this thing back. Nope, they've glued it. Oh dear. Well, that was kind of a pointless exercise, wasn't it? It still works. Now that is quality.